look, if God has a plan for our life, we're living for Him, then we can have confidence that He will be with us. I grew up in Sydney, and the top universities in Sydney was, of course, the University of Sydney and University of New South Wales. They were the top two. I attended neither. I was in that second tier of universities. But you'd hear occasionally about universities from other states, and from time to time you'd hear about Monash University, Monash University. And that's, of course, in Melbourne. And I'm sure virtually all of you have heard of Monash University. It has a status and a prestige and all those sort of things. But do you know why it's called Monash University? It was named after, some I thought you would, I thought gentlemen up the back would, named after Sir John Monash. He was a military commander in World War One, not World War Two in the 1940s, but in World War One. It's a long time ago. Monash was born in Melbourne in June 1865. His parents were, this is how old this chap was, that they were Prussian Jews. Now, we don't talk about Prussia anymore, it's now Poland. So Monash's parents were Jewish migrants from what was then Prussia, now Poland. Born in Melbourne, attended the Scotch College, was dux of the school, studied engineering at Melbourne University. He joined the military quite early. He was brilliant. He was, at the age of 23, placed in charge of constructing a new railway while he was still studying his degree. That's how impressive Monash was. The outbreak of World War I, Monash was given command of the 4th Infantry Brigade. He landed in Gallipoli in April 1915. He obviously survived Gallipoli. He faced criticism from his performance there, as many did in that Gallipoli campaign. But he took his brigade to France in June of 1916, and he finally found success as a commander. Success. He had one success after another, to the point where he was given command over the entire Australian military corps. What made Monash so effective? I mean, there's a university named after him. What made him so effective? Well, there was a British historian by the name of A.J.P. Taylor. I remember the name from when I studied history. And he said that Sir John Monash was the only general of creative originality produced by the First World War. Sort of in those days, it was about military might. It was about just having enough troops on the ground. Think of World War I, the trenches, just the hundreds of thousands of lives just spent for no advantage. For no advantage. But Monash was a thinker. He was a planner. He was very effective. Though he was under his British superiors, he was an Aussie back in the 1916 and 1917. He supported his troops. He had this concept that the health and well-being of his troops was really paramount in winning battles. He knew about organisation and planning. He knew the components of the frontline forces, the logistics, the medics, the recreational services. You know that his troops said of Monash that this is in World War I. This is World War I. That one of the most extraordinary things about this, one of his famous battles, the Battle of Hamel, and they said it wasn't the use of the armoured tanks, and it wasn't even the tremendous success of the operation, but the fact that in the midst of the battle, Monash had arranged delivery of hot meals up to the front line. Now, this is World War I. Now, this isn't even World War II. I mean, over 100 years ago, soldiers could get a hot meal from their commander. Now, that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Do you know there's not only a university named after Monash, There is a city of Monash. It's a local government area in our state. There is a division of Monash, a federal electoral division. There is a Monash Medical Centre, a Monash Freeway. There's a Monash Scholarship. There is a village in Israel named after Monash. There is a Sir John Monash Centre in France. This man's name is everywhere. When he came back from World War I, he held many important positions. He was a leading figure in Melbourne's Jewish community. When he died of heart disease in Melbourne in October 1931, in his mid-60s, there was a state funeral of some 300,000 mourners. And this, we're talking about Australia here. That'd be impressive numbers in America or in Europe. Now, why do I mention this commander? Because what I'd like to do on a Sunday evening, I'm not sure how long it's going to take, is I want to look at some of the military commanders in the Bible. I'm not going to get to all of them, but I at least want to get to a couple. And I want to look at two. I want to look at the commanders that looked after King Saul and King David. Saul had a commander called Abner. David had a commander called Joab. And just as you have the rivalry between Saul and David, that certainly spilled into their soldiers and to their commanders. What is the role of a military commander? Haven't been one myself. It's not on my radar. A little bit old. Even if I applied, I'd get rejected. But it seems to me that you have to organise. You've got to strategise. You've got to recruit. You have to inspire. Sometimes you've got to fight. I'm sure that the average soldier wouldn't take kindly to being ordered around by someone that had never seen battle, that had just been behind a desk. And so we're going to look in other measures at some different military commanders in history, so we can learn from them as we study Abner and as we study Joab. So we're in 1 Samuel 14 this evening, and whenever we're in the Old Testament, we've got to think to ourselves, where actually are we? If you could sort of drop a pin like we do on our phones, our maps, where are we? Well, we're about 1,000 years before the time of Christ. And we are looking at a time in the beginning of the reign of King Saul, who was God's first choice after people wanted their own king like the other nations, and God selects Saul after they demanded one from Samuel, priest and king. So we're in the reign of Saul, the first king of Israel. And, obviously there are 14 chapters preceding our context tonight, but Saul had a good start to his kingdom. He had a great start. He had great success. We're told that Saul, in 1 Samuel 9:2, it says there wasn't a more handsome person than he among the children of Israel, and from his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. Right? This is like, it's like JFK, a taller version, godlier version. Yeah. This guy looks like a leader. People would want to follow him. He's tall. He's handsome. He has no comparison. He has every advantage. He has every advantage just physically. Just you look at him, and this is an impressive man. If he's got some sense and skill, I would want to follow him. God made him like that. God made him like that. We know that. We know that Saul's reign sort of went off the rails pretty quickly. He's very erratic, very self-willed. Samuel's delayed in 1 Samuel 13, and Saul says, fine, I'll be the priest now. And God says, no, you won't. Made you king. You can't make sacrifices. You're not a Levite. You can't make these sacrifices. And actually God at that point, through Samuel, said, Saul, your kingdom is over. You're going to lose this kingdom. You stepped over a line that no king should cross. Well, in 1 Samuel 14, he forbids his army to eat until the evening before the Philistines are destroyed. I mean, you try and tell hungry soldiers that they can't eat until the battle's won. that command isn't going to go over too well. Soldiers need energy to fight. They need energy. And so we're first introduced to Abner in 1 Samuel 14. If you look at verse 47 of 1 Samuel 14, so Saul established his sovereignty over Israel and fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab and against the people of Ammon, against Edom. They are to the south and to the east, perennial enemies, against the kings of Zobar, against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he harassed them. In other words, Saul is enjoying a lot of success. A lot of success. It says he gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites in 48 and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. Now, verse 49, we get a list of Saul's family members. And in verse 50, we're given the name of Saul's wife, Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz. And then it says, and the name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. So his family's related. And because of that, you're going to get a lot of trust. You're going to get a lot of trust. You want someone that you can trust. This sort of very sensitive position of commander. In fact, it says in verse 51, Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. Just some historical names here, just to authenticate the record. Now, look at verse 52. It's important. There's a fierce war with Philistines all the days of Saul. They never get a moment's rest. There's always battles. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he took him for himself. Selective conscription. That's what it is. We don't want anyone. We want the best. We want the best. So here's the point I'm trying to make. That if Saul the king sees any strong man or any valiant man, he's going to take him for himself, then Abner must also be on the lookout as commander. Abner would also have the responsibility of recruiting the best future soldiers. Now, the next time Abner appears in 1 Samuel is in chapter 17. So we're sort of going to move from 14 to 17, but what happens between those chapters is significant. In that time, God again tells Saul that he is rejected because he spares Agag, king of the Amalekites, plus the best of the flock. Saul is not really repentant. He's still doing his own thing. But even beyond that, Samuel is told by God to go and anoint another king. There's going to be a young man in the wings. Now you know a lot of these details. We know that it is David, son of Jesse, the youngest of Jesse's 8 sons. And one by one, they come before Samuel, and Samuel can't believe that God hasn't chosen any of those 7. Right? And finally, it's like, is there anyone else? Like, how could there be nice? Oh yeah, there's one more. Oh yeah, he's down there looking after my sheep. It's the 8th son. It's David. He's the one. He's the one. God's future shepherd king is exactly where he should be. He's looking after his dad's sheep. There's a beauty to that imagery of he's there looking after sheep, because one day he's going to look after some human sheep, so to speak. There's a psalm that talks about David's appointment. Psalm 70 says, he also chose David his servant, and he took him from the sheepfolds, from following the ewes that had young. He brought him to shepherd Jacob, his people, and Israel his inheritance. So he shepherded them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands. So David gets anointed. Doesn't mean he's going to be king straight away. It's just he is set aside by the Lord. God's going to have to deal with Saul. And then even before we're introduced to Abner a second time, remember Saul gets afflicted by an evil spirit. And there's a servant who comes to Saul, and he says in chapter 16, verse 18, look, I've seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite who is skilled in playing, a mighty man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a handsome person, and the Lord is with him. Now, in one sense, Saul had been looking for those kind of men to conscript into the military. But David slips through the cracks. He hasn't been conscripted. But the servant tells Saul, listen, there's someone who can play beautiful instruments, and you know what? God uses David to minister to Saul, to comfort him, to soothe him. There's lots of music out there. It's not going to soothe you. It's going to give you a headache. Try and avoid those ones, yeah? That music is going to bless you, bless your heart, bless your soul, okay? And then in chapter 17, like David and Goliath, the whole chapter, most of the chapter, okay? And our kids have heard this at least a dozen times in Sunday school, you know, at least a dozen times. Don't you get David and Goliath once a year in Sunday school? At least. So they know a lot of the details of David and Goliath, right? But if you go to 1 Samuel 17 and look at verse 54 and 55, this is the second time Abner's mentioned at the end of the story of David and Goliath, right? Now look at verse 54. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put his armor in his tent. What a souvenir. Talk about proof. So what must have been a massive armor that Goliath, right? When Saul saw David going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? Now Saul had met David. David had come and played in front of him, but it's like he has never met him. And Abner said, as your soul lives, O king, he's sort of swearing an oath. As your soul lives, O king, I do not know. Abner has no awareness of David up to this very point, despite his military prowess, his athleticism, his skill, all the rest of it. Abner doesn't know him. Now, there's one explanation that fits why Saul asked about David. That is that, remember, there was a bit of a reward for anyone who fought Goliath. That is, they could marry one of Saul's daughters. And so it may be that Saul wanted to know about David's lineage, his family, right? Is this going to be a good match in terms of our status and things like that within Israel? But both Saul and Abner miss this guy. Abner, the commander who should have been looking for the best, missed him. God has David exactly where he wants him. God is going to raise up David exactly when God says it is time. God's going to have David away looking after the sheep. He's going to have him in the wilderness wandering away from Saul. David's life is going to go in this direction and that direction, and obscurity and fear and dread and the highs and the lows. God is going to orchestrate David's life. So look at verse 56 to 58. The king says, inquire whose son this young man is. Then as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? So David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. Now, when David says this, he had already been anointed by Samuel. But he's not going to mention that to Saul. I mean, that'd be just crazy. And he's wise. He knows better. He was content to be the son of your servant Jesse. Content. He announces himself. And Abner missed it. He missed it. He's but a man. Now there's one more reference to Abner, and that is in chapter 26. 26 to Abner. And again, we're jumping about 9 chapters. 9 chapters. And in that time frame, after David's victory against Goliath, we know that Saul gets very jealous, very irrational. He seeks to take David's life. He hunts for him. He treats David like the worst enemy. I mean, if only Saul had gone after Goliath like that. Because remember, Saul was a giant himself. He was head and shoulders above any other man. He was the closest thing to a giant in Israel. Now, probably not as tall, certainly not as tall as Goliath, but he's tall. He's tall. Saul hasn't accepted God's verdict on his kingship. He hasn't accepted it. He knows David is a viable alternative. You know what the women sang, don't you? Saul has slain his thousands, and this must have killed Saul, and David his tens of thousands. That would kill any king with ambition and pride, would kill him. Saul knows David is viable. I mean, he after killing Goliath, he's the one. He's the one. But you know, something really wonderful came out of those dark days, don't you? That there was this unlikely friendship of David and, would you believe it, Saul's son Jonathan. I mean, you couldn't make this up, could you? Couldn't make this up. And Jonathan, he's sort of next in line. He's next in line. And you have this incredible friendship between David and Jonathan that's going to drive a wedge between Saul and Jonathan. It's going to kill the father-son dynamic. It's going to kill it. But guess what? Jonathan knows what is right. He knows what is right. He's going to do what's right. And you know what happens to David when he's on the run from Saul? He is able to attract some 400 men to come and serve him. It says in 1 Samuel 22:2, and everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented, were they all Victorians? Right? It fits the profile. Right? Debt, distress, discontented, right? 2026. So he became captain over them, and there are about 400 men with him. So David can attract followers when he's on the run. I mean, this is his character coming out. His character. And we know that David, I omitted to read it earlier on, but he was a handsome young man. Not as tall as King Saul, but again, he's someone you want to follow. But he has the character and the heart for that kind of leadership. And then last point before we get to 26 is that in chapter 24, David spares Saul's life by cutting his robe after Saul wanders into a cave where David is hiding. So David's just in this cave with his men, and Saul finds them. Yeah, Saul finds them. And David cuts the side of his robe. And says, Saul, look, you can see, I don't bear you any ill will. Could have taken your life, but, okay, then off they go. Saul leaves them alone for a little while, but David knows that Saul's going to change his mind, come after him. So we get to chapter 26, 1 Samuel 26. And I want you to look here at I'm in 1 Samuel 16. 1 Samuel 26, look at verse 1. The Ziphites came to Saul. They're going to turn David over to him. Is David not hiding in the hill of Hakila opposite Jeshimon? In verse 2, Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having, look at this, 3,000 chosen men of Israel. He's got thousands with him. Is it overkill? Is it paranoia? Right? 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul encamps himself in the hill in verse 3. David stays in the wilderness. He sees that Saul has come after him. In verse 4, David sends out spies. to confirm Saul is looking for him. But look at verse 5. So David arose and came to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. Saul has Abner right at his side. Right at his side. He's right there. Now Saul lay within the camp, with the people encamped all around him. I mean, Saul is protected. There's just layers and layers of people. He's got thousands of troops, plus he has Abner right next to him. He's safe. And look at verse 6. David answered and said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab. Okay, Joab's mentioned. We're going to learn more about him in coming weeks. Saying, who will go down with me to Saul in the camp? Abishai, brother of Joab, says, I'll go down with you. No hesitation. Abishai's going to feature later on. I'll go down with you. They're the sort of military people you want, that are just, we're going. We'll go with you. Straight away. So in verse 7, David Abishai came to the people by night. There Saul lay, sleeping within the camp, with his spear stuck in the ground by his head. And look at this. And Abner and the people lay all around him, totally protected. We'd say it was impregnable. Impregnable force. Now look at verse 8. Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day. So Abishai is reaching a lot of conclusions. He's reaching a lot of conclusions. It's like, this is too good to be true. Here he is. God's helped us again. Now therefore, please, let me strike him once at the spear, right to the earth. And I love this. I'll not have to strike him a second time. David, I promise I will not miss. I won't miss. This will only be done once. Once. I promise. David again restrains. He says in verse 8, do not destroy him who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless. And David says in verse 10, as the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike me, or his day shall come to die. He shall go out to battle and perish, or strike him. The Lord forbid that I should stretch my hand against the Lord's anointed. But please take now the spear and the jug of water that are by his head, not his feet, his head, and let us go. Yeah? We're going to take some souvenirs. You know, be like going to someone's bedroom and just, you know, grabbing their old dirty handkerchief under their pillow and say, hey, look where I've been. Yeah? We're going to show him how close we got to him. Right? Now look at verse 20. It's very interesting. So David took the spear and the jug of water by Saul's head, and they got away, and no man saw or knew it or awoke, but it goes further. It's not just that these guys are like stealth, they're like shadows. They're going to make some noise. Look at this. For they were all asleep because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. Right? I mean, talk about getting a sleeping pill from above. Nothing's going to wake those guys. Nothing's going to wake them. God has just put them to sleep. Right? Put them to sleep. So it wasn't that David and his men, I'm sure they were very skillful. I'm sure they were careful. But, you know, they're going to need God's help to pull this off. They're going to need his help to penetrate Saul's camp. I mean, what are the prospects? You think about those few thousand men. At any point, I mean, if we had 3,000 at some sort of camp, surely at any point of the night, someone's awake. Yeah? Someone can't sleep. Someone's snoring. Yeah? Someone's turning. God gave them a deep sleep. Deep sleep. They're not going to awake. Well, in verse 13, David goes to the other side, stood on the top of a hill afar off, a great distance. He's going to keep his distance now. And look at this, verse 14. And David called out to the people, and look at this, and to Abner. He names them. He says, do you not answer Abner? Then Abner answered and said, who are you calling out to the king? It's like he's deflecting. David doesn't call out to Saul, he calls out to Abner. Why? Because Abner should have protected the king, should have protected him, and he didn't. He's fast asleep. Why? Because God made him sleep, and God made sure he slept. But Abner's responsible. He's responsible. And then David says in verse 15 to Abner, are you not a man, and who is like you in Israel? So that's how important a job this commander had. Who is like you in Israel? I mean, he is like second to the king. Second to the king. Why then have you not guarded your lord the king? Abner, you failed. You failed. If one of the people came in to destroy your lord the king, you know, the reason why there is a Monash University today is because Monash succeeded. If he'd lost those battles in World War I, it's going to be some other university, isn't it? Isn't it? You're not going to have a highway named after him if he's just losing battles, but because he won, he's remembered. Well, Abner failed. Abner's on the wrong side. He was serving a king in a murderous plan. And then in verse 16, the thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die because you've not guarded your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is and the jug of water that was by his head. Abner exposed. Why could Abner not stay awake and protect the king? Because he's on the wrong side. Because God was against Saul. Abner and Saul were ultimately fighting a losing battle. A losing battle. They could have had 10,000 soldiers and they're all going to be asleep. God will just keep more people asleep. Abner's military expertise did not thwart God's purposes. And that should encourage us because, look, if God has a plan for our life, we're living for him, then we can have confidence that he will be with us. David's vastly outnumbered. So what's God do? Well, it was miraculous. It was a miracle in a sense. It was God's intervention, keeping all these men in this deep sleep. As we read from Proverbs 24, don't lie in wait, O wicked man, against the dwelling of the righteous. Don't do it. Because a righteous man is going to fall but rise again. And David is safe from Saul and Abner and the thousands of their soldiers because he's God's anointed king. And I hope in the coming weeks we can see some of the dynamics playing out in the lives of these men, these commanders. And I trust that we can say with Paul in 2 Timothy 4 verse 18, the Lord will deliver me from every evil work and preserve me for his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen.